My name is Brielle. I'm 30, a software engineer living in Atlanta, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the daughter nobody in my family really saw, unless they needed something. This past Christmas Eve, I flew back to Knoxville for the big family dinner, even though everyone told me not to. The second we sat down, my mom raised her glass and said, cold as ice, "This family is still standing because of your little sister. As for you, you contribute nothing." The table went dead quiet. I looked straight at her and answered completely calm. "Then what does Mom use the $2,500 I send every single month for?" My little sister froze and dropped her fork. My mother exploded in anger right there at the dinner table, and that was the exact moment everything I'd been holding in for years finally came out. If you've ever been the kid everyone pretended didn't exist until they wanted your money, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happened next changed my life forever. Growing up in Knoxville, Tennessee, I always knew exactly where I stood in my family. Nowhere. My little sister Kinsley Harper, 27 now, was the one they put on a pedestal before she could even walk. Straight A's, cheer captain, full ride scholarship to Vanderbilt. Every milestone came with banners, parties, and endless praise. Me, I learned early that love came with conditions, so by 17, I stopped waiting for it. I worked 2 jobs through high school, earned enough scholarships to cover college at Georgia State, and never once asked my parents for a single dollar. While Kinsley got new cars and rent paid, I slept on friends' couches my freshman year and figured out the rest on my own. Fast forward to today. I'm a senior software engineer at a fintech company in Midtown Atlanta, pulling well into 6 figures with bonuses. I like my life, quiet, predictable, and mine. My boyfriend Nathan Whitaker, the one person who actually sees me, keeps telling me I don't owe anyone anything, and for years I believed him. Then 2022 happened. My dad Ronald lost his job as a regional sales manager when his company downsized. He was 58, no degree beyond high school, and the offers that came in were half the pay. Mom had always worked part-time at a boutique downtown, nothing that could cover the mortgage on the 4-bedroom house they refused to downsize. Suddenly the texts started. Not warm ones, just short and to the point. "We're short on the power bill this month. Car insurance went up, any chance you can help?" At first it was 200 here, 300 there. I sent it without complaining because deep down I still wanted them to notice. By June 2023, it had turned into a standing transfer, $2,500 on the first of every month, straight from my account to theirs. 19 months by Christmas 2024, $47,500 total. I never asked for a thank you. I never even told Nathan the real amount. I just said I was helping out a little. My best friend Sloane Carter was the only person who knew the full number, and she kept telling me to stop, that they were never going to appreciate it. I didn't listen. Some part of me still hoped that if I gave enough, they'd finally see me the way they saw Kinsley. Nathan hated the idea of me going home for Christmas. He sat on the edge of our bed the night before my flight and tried one last time. "Brielle, you know how this ends. You come back exhausted and hurt, and they still treat you like an ATM." Sloane sent me the same warning in a voice note. "Do not get on that plane. They don't deserve you." But I went anyway. I told myself maybe this year would be different. Maybe after almost 50 grand, they'd at least pretend to be grateful. I even bought an expensive bottle of wine I couldn't really afford and wrapped it like it mattered. Looking back, I don't know why I thought blood would suddenly develop a conscience. The second I walked through the door in Knoxville, I felt the same old chill, the one that told me I was a guest in my own childhood home. And that night at the dinner table was when everything I'd buried for years finally cracked wide open. Christmas Eve 2024, I landed in Knoxville just after 6, picked up my rental car, and drove straight to the house I grew up in on Lions View Pike. The porch light was on, but nobody came out to greet me. I let myself in with the key I still had and was hit by the same mix of pine cleaner and cinnamon candles Mom always used. Dad was in his recliner watching football highlights on mute, barely glancing up when I walked past. Mom was in the kitchen fussing over the ham, and Kinsley sat at the island scrolling her phone, legs crossed, looking like she belonged in a magazine spread. She had on a new emerald green dress and the diamond studs Mom bragged about buying her for her promotion. Mom finally noticed me standing there with my overnight bag and gave me the quick once-over. "You're late. Dinner's almost ready." No hug, no good to see you. Just that same tone she used when I was 12 and forgot to take out the trash. She immediately turned back to Kinsley and launched into how my sister had just been named marketing manager at the biggest ad agency in Nashville, complete with a corner office and a company car. Kinsley smiled the practiced smile I'd seen 1,000 times and said, "It's really not that big a deal, Mom," while clearly loving every second. We moved to the dining room, the same long oak table that had been there since I was in elementary school. Dad carved the ham, Mom passed the scalloped potatoes, and for about 10 minutes, everything felt almost normal. Then Mom set her wine glass down, looked around the table like she was about to give a toast, and smiled the coldest smile I'd ever seen. "This family is still standing because of your little sister," she announced, raising her glass toward Kinsley. "As for you, you contribute nothing." The words landed harder than any slap. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, but I didn't look away. I set my fork down, folded my hands in my lap, and answered in the calmest voice I could find. "Then, what does Mom use the $2,500 I send every month for?" Dead silence. Kinsley's fork slipped from her fingers and clattered against her plate, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Mom's face went from smug to scarlet in half a second. She slammed her glass down so hard the stem cracked and red wine bled across the white tablecloth. "How dare you throw money in our faces on Christmas Eve?" she screamed, standing up so fast her chair scraped across the hardwood. "After everything we've done for you?" Dad finally looked up from his plate and brought his fist down on the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. "That's enough, Brielle. You will not ruin this night with your attitude." Kinsley just stared at me, mouth slightly open, eyes wide like she was seeing me for the first time in years. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, doing the math on 19 months of transfers she never knew existed. I pushed my chair back, slowly stood up, and looked at each of them in turn. Mom was breathing like she'd run a mile. Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the vein in his temple, and Kinsley still hadn't picked up her fork. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked toward the front door without another word. Behind me, I heard Mom shouting my name, Dad yelling something about respect, and Kinsley finally whispering, "Wait, Brielle." But I didn't stop. I stepped out into the freezing night, pulled the door shut behind me, and let it click. Locked. My hands were shaking, but not from cold. By the time I reached the rental car, I already had the Hilton Garden Inn pulled up on my phone. I booked the room, drove the 15 minutes downtown, and checked in just after 9. When I finally sat on the edge of the hotel bed, the adrenaline crashed, and I cried for maybe 5 minutes, then wiped my face, poured myself a drink from the minibar, and turned my phone face down. That night was the first time in 30 years I didn't sleep under the same roof as my parents on Christmas Eve, and somehow it felt like the most honest thing I'd ever done. Early February 2025, I was doing my usual quarterly credit report check, something I've done religiously ever since I got my first apartment in Atlanta. I log into annualcreditreport.com the way most people check Instagram, and that morning I noticed a hard inquiry dated November 18, 2024, from Wells Fargo Home Mortgage. I'd never applied for anything with Wells Fargo in my life. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to stay calm, and called the number listed on the inquiry right then. After 20 minutes on hold and 2 transfers, I finally reached a loan processor in their Knoxville branch. I gave her my full name and the last 4 of my social, and she pulled up the file without hesitation. Yes, ma'am. You're listed as co-borrower on a cash-out refinance that closed November 22nd. The primary borrowers are Ronald and Deborah Harper. The new loan amount is $380,000. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. I asked her to repeat it, thinking I'd heard wrong, but the numbers stayed the same. She kept talking about payment history and escrow, while I stared at my laptop screen, heart hammering against my ribs. They had refinanced the house 2 months before Christmas, pulled out equity, and somehow added me to the mortgage without me ever signing a single document. I managed to keep my voice steady long enough to ask how my electronic signature had been verified. She explained that everything was handled through an online notary platform, that my identity had been confirmed with my social security number, date of birth, and answers to security questions pulled from public records and old credit headers. In other words, they used information I'd given my parents years ago for taxes and insurance forms, information I never thought they'd weaponize. By the time I hung up, I was shaking. If they stopped making payments, the bank would come after me for the full $380,000 plus interest and fees. My credit, the one thing I had built completely on my own, could be destroyed overnight. I sat on the couch for a full minute just breathing, then grabbed my phone and called Sloan. She picked up on the second ring, and the second she heard my voice, she knew something was wrong. I didn't even say hello. I just told her what the loan officer had said word for word, and then I started crying, the ugly kind where you can't catch your breath. Sloan didn't try to calm me down with empty words. She listened until I was done, then spoke in the steady tone she always uses when everything is on fire. Brielle, this is identity theft straight up. They forged your electronic signature. We are not letting this slide. She made me read her every detail the processor had given me, asked for the loan number, and told me to screenshot my credit report exactly as it appeared. After we hung up, I forwarded her everything, then opened my banking app and canceled the automatic transfer that was scheduled for the 1st of February. I watched the little confirmation message pop up, scheduled transfer canceled, and felt something inside me shift, like a door I'd kept cracked open for 30 years, finally slammed shut. That night, I barely slept. I kept running worst-case scenarios, foreclosure notices in my name, collection calls at work. My credit score tanked right when Nathan and I had started talking about buying a place together. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mom's face at the Christmas table, the way she'd smiled right before she announced I contributed nothing. Turns out she'd already made sure I was contributing whether I wanted to or not. That same night, I called the house in Knoxville and put it on speaker so I wouldn't have to hold the phone while my hands shook. Mom answered on the third ring, sounding surprised to see my name on the caller ID. I didn't waste time on greetings. I told her exactly what Wells Fargo had confirmed, that they had refinanced the house in November, taken out $380,000, and listed me as co-borrower, using my social security number and old personal information. I laid it out flat, no yelling, just facts. Mom went completely silent for a few seconds, then the tears started. Brielle, we only did it to protect the family's future. She sobbed into the phone. Interest rates were low, and we wanted to make sure the house stayed safe if anything happened to your father. You always said you'd help the family. Dad grabbed the phone from her. His voice was rough, the same tone he used when I was a teenager and came home late. You've been sending money for almost 2 years and never once complained, he said. We figured you wouldn't mind being on the loan too. It's still our house. You're just backup. Backup. That word hit harder than anything else. I had been backup my entire life, and now they'd made it official on a legal document worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I told them this wasn't backup, this was identity theft, and that I was getting a lawyer. Mom started wailing in the background about how ungrateful I was after everything they'd sacrificed. Dad tried the guilt trip next, reminding me how hard things had been since he lost his job, how the money I sent kept the lights on. I let him talk until he ran out of steam, then hung up without another word. As soon as the call ended, I dialed Kinsley. She was at her apartment in Nashville and picked up right away, sounding cautious. I hadn't spoken to her since Christmas Eve, but this time, I didn't hold anything back. I walked her through the refinance, the forged e-signature, the exact loan amount, and the fact that our parents had done it 2 weeks before, sitting across from me at that dinner table, pretending I contributed nothing. Kinsley didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then she whispered, "They told me they paid cash for my new car last year." Her voice cracked on the last word. For the first time in our lives, she was doing the same math I'd been doing for years, and the numbers weren't adding up in Mom and Dad's favor anymore. She asked what I planned to do. I told her straight. I was hiring a lawyer and getting my name off that loan, no matter what it took. Kinsley didn't defend them, didn't make excuses. She just said, "Let me know what you need from me." That was the moment I realized the golden child pedestal was finally cracking. Sloane called me back an hour later. She had already been researching attorneys who handled mortgage fraud and identity theft cases in Georgia. She found one with excellent reviews, a former federal prosecutor who now did consumer protection work, and booked the first available consultation for the following Tuesday morning. "We're not waiting," she told me. "The longer your name stays on that loan, the more damage they can do." I spent the rest of the weekend gathering every bank statement, every transfer confirmation, every old email where Mom had asked for a little help this month. By Monday night, I had a 2-inch binder organized by date and a timeline printed out in color. Nathan came home from work, took one look at the stack of papers on the dining table, and wrapped his arms around me without asking questions. He just held me while I stared at the folder and finally admitted out loud that I was done being the family safety net. 1 week later, I walked into the 23rd floor office of my attorney Gregory Vaughn in Midtown Atlanta. Sloane, right beside me, carrying the binder we'd spent nights putting together. Greg was in his mid-40s, calm, direct, and didn't waste time on small talk. He took the thick folder, flipped through the color-coded tabs, and within 15 minutes looked up with the clearest answer I'd heard in months. "This is textbook identity theft under federal and Georgia law," he said, tapping the page that showed the electronic signature disclosure. "Your biometric data doesn't match the IP address used for the e-notary session came from Knoxville, and the knowledge-based authentication questions were answered with information only a family member would have. The notary was deceived, not negligent, which actually helps us." He explained that Wells Fargo would move fast to protect itself once fraud was formally alleged. Banks hate being on the wrong side of a CFPB complaint. Greg drafted everything that same afternoon, a dispute letter to the lender, demanding immediate removal of my name from the loan, a fraud affidavit for me to sign under penalty of perjury, and separate reports to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the 3 credit bureaus. He also filed a police report with Atlanta PD for identity theft, so I'd have an official case number, something the bank almost always requires. Sloane and I spent the next 2 days scanning 19 months of bank transfers, redacting only account numbers, and building a timeline that showed exactly how much money had moved from my Atlanta account to my parents' joint account in Knoxville. Every first-of-the-month payment was there, $47,500 total, all while they were quietly adding me to a mortgage I never agreed to. By Thursday morning, Greg had everything submitted through certified mail and electronic portals. He told me to expect pushback at first, but that the combination of the fraud affidavit and the police report usually forced the lender to release the co-borrower within 30 to 45 days to avoid regulatory headaches. "They'll eat the cost of rewriting the loan before they risk a federal investigation," he said, and for the first time since February, I felt something close to relief. That same week, I double-checked that the February transfer had stayed canceled. When the first rolled around and no money left my account, I didn't feel guilty the way I thought I would. I felt free. Greg called me personally 10 days later to confirm that Wells Fargo had already placed the loan in dispute status and frozen any further reporting to my credit file. My name was officially off the note pending final verification, and the bank had opened its own internal fraud investigation. He warned me that my parents would likely receive a demand letter soon, and that they might try to contact me when it arrived. I told him I was ready for whatever came next. Walking out of his office that afternoon with Sloane, the spring air felt different. The weight wasn't completely gone yet, but it had shifted from my shoulders to where it belonged. From March to August 2025, my parents missed 6 straight mortgage payments. Without my monthly transfers and with no new cash out possible, the numbers simply didn't work anymore. Wells Fargo sent the first default notice in April, then the demand letter in June. By the time the official notice of foreclosure was recorded at the Knox County Register of Deeds in early August, the document became public record for anyone to pull online. In a town the size of Knoxville, that kind of paperwork travels faster than gossip usually does. It started with one of Mom's friends from the ladies' Bible study who worked part-time at the title company. She saw the filing mentioned it to another member, and by the next Sunday, the entire congregation knew the Harpers were losing the house on Lions View Pike. Dad's golf buddies at the country club stopped inviting him to the Tuesday scramble. Invitations to cookouts dried up. The couple who had spent decades presenting the perfect upper-middle-class image suddenly found themselves on the outside of every circle they'd once ruled. Kinsley made it official in September. She drove to Knoxville, packed the few childhood things she still wanted, and told Mom and Dad face-to-face that she was done. She changed her phone number the next day and moved her mailing address to a P.O. box. When Mom tried to reach her through mutual friends, Kinsley sent one short text: "You lied to both of us for years. I'm out." That was the last contact any of us had with her about our parents. By April 2026, my own life looked nothing like it had a year and a half earlier. I accepted the promotion to engineering manager at work, complete with a new office overlooking Piedmont Park and a team of 12 reporting to me. Nathan and I got married in a small ceremony on the rooftop of the Pont City Market, with Sloane as my only attendant and 20 of our closest friends. 3 months later, we found out I was pregnant, due just before Thanksgiving. The final email from Mom arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning while I was sipping decaf at my desk. The subject line was blank. Inside were 4 words: "You destroyed everything we worked for." No apology, no explanation, just accusation. I stared at the screen for maybe 10 seconds, then blocked the address, deleted the message, and emptied the trash. I never wrote back. There was nothing left to say. Some doors are meant to stay closed forever. I shut that one the day I canceled the first transfer, and I have never once looked back. If you've stayed with me through all 7 parts of this story, thank you truly. Watching my parents lose the house they tried to steal from under me wasn't the revenge I wanted. It was simply the consequence they earned. The real victory was building a life where my worth isn't measured by how much I give away. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to close a door on family for good? How did you know it was the right choice? Drop your thoughts below, share this if it hit home, and I'll see you in the next one.